We're gonna get, well, maybe we can get you to do a bit of an intro.
Yeah.
A little bit more than Mark is great, because
They
that's
know
what
that.
I would say, yes. Yeah, so I'll just leave the floor to you, Mark. Thank you for being here with us.
Do I get some popcorn?
Do you want it as you talk?
While we're waiting,
Apparently as
did
everyone-
anybody have any questions they wanted answered? While we're waiting. And I'll tell you if your question is covered in the
Okay,
material.
it's a situation.
Could be about anything in real estate.
Yeah, the tenant got a notice from the landlord that they're gonna be taking it back for their son. If they can't find a place to rent in time, do they have, can they apply and say, I can't find a place yet? We are diligently trying, but it's a $6,000 rental, you're in that price range. The house, so it's hard to find, harder to find.
It's people, nobody has to leave. They can dispute the notice.
Yeah, okay.
And then that will delay it until the tenant landlord can get a hearing.
Mhm.
And then they can say, if you let me stay an extra 2 months, I'll sign an agreement to leave in 4 months. But I would just,
We're trying to find a place, but if we don't,
yeah.
by December.
That's one of the biggest problems with all of this. There's
Yeah,
no place
I know.
for tenants to go. We'll talk about that
Okay,
today.
okay.
That's one of our topics.
Okay.
So, have any of you taken a course with me?
Yes.
Oh, so you have. That's why you had me in. Have any of you sent the deal to me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Why haven't the rest of you?
But that's why
I
they're
don't
here, to make
understand.
sure that they will in
I don't understand why
future.
everybody doesn't send the deals to me.
Your rates are, what are your rates?
I'll
They're
tell
really
you,
good.
I'll tell you, it's not a
Yeah.
secret. I've been doing this for 35 years, so I think I've heard everything. I've written best-selling books for real estate agents, for buyers, sellers, and landlords. My landlord guy, I almost have none left. I was at Trev this morning and everybody was grabbing them. And I've been on every TV news program about real estate. I've written articles over the years in the Toronto Star and Real Estate Magazine, and I'm with real estate lawyers. Have any of you seen our car driving around? We have about a dozen of them, and we go all over Ontario. And so these are the books that I'm very proud of. And let me tell you a bit about our firm. So 95% of the time, we go to the client house to sign the papers. That is their option. We don't say, when can you come in the office? It's, when do you want us to come to you? If a client really wants to sign with me, I'm very happy to meet with them at my head office, but very few do, and I don't take it personal. I live far from here. I live on Hillmount, near Glencairn and Bathurst. So if somebody wants to see me at home on a Sunday, I'll do that, but most people, I don't take it personal. We go to them. So I had, people say, how fast can you close a deal? I had somebody call me, a seller. I'm sorry, we never called anybody. We're closing tomorrow. Can you close the deal for us? I said, no, that's fine. Send me the agreement. So they sent me the agreement. It immediately goes to our intake department, and all the information about the seller and the buyer is input into the system. And the clerk is given the file and populates all the sale documents, because the sale documents are the sale documents. Purchase takes a little longer because you have to have the mortgage instruction from the lender. Yes, the appointment with the seller is already being done, because I have a separate department where they just contact the seller when you want your appointment. Usually it's a week before closing. This was an emergency. So she's calling the seller, when do you want your appointment? At the same time, the guy is driving to the seller's house. Before he gets there, the paper is sent to his iPad. We have a ruling from CRA that if somebody signs in front of each other with an iPad, that's an original signature. And the other law firm must take it as an original signature. So you're signing on the iPad, then the commissioner emails you a copy, emails a copy back to the clerk in the office, email to the other side, and we can close the deal. One thing we couldn't figure out was, how do you email the keys? So instead, what we do, so we found a solution. What we do is we give every one of our sellers our own lockbox, my lockbox. And we say, when you leave the keys in the lockbox, and we give the buyer lawyer, as soon as the money is in my account, we give them the code to the lockbox. So the buyer, who's not my client, doesn't have to go downtown to pick up the keys, they just go right to the house. Is that a better solution?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it avoids the courier and everything else getting lost, whether it's easy. And we leave the lockbox for the buyer as a gift, because it's cheaper to buy a lockbox than to pay for a courier. So we avoid all that mess at closing. And then when it comes to, and so this is how we're able to close everywhere. I close London, Niagara, Muskoka, because we can drive there. Wherever we can drive, in 2 hours, we close. I have a couple offices in Ottawa, so we do the whole Ottawa territory. And because we can, I just supervise all the deals. Now, the other difference we have from the other firms is we have a trust account at every bank for 2 reasons. Number one is for the client, the other is for the deal. Because for a client, we don't want anybody running to the lawyer's office with a bank draft on the day of closing. You know how stressful that is? Running to the bank to get a draft last minute. And frankly, just personally, we're not insured for this. If somebody gave me a forged bank draft, we're not insured for that. Why would I even take a chance? Instead, we just say to them, we're not insured.
You do it.
We're not insured, which means that every lawyer who does this is not insured for this.
Oh.
So P.S., we just say to the client, where do you bank? I'm a Scotia Bank. I have a Scotia Trust account. Just go to the bank. We send them instructions. The clerk sends them instruction a week before closing. Go to the bank, give this to the teller. It's got our trust account information. Do a transfer like you're paying a Bell bill. They give you a receipt. You take a picture with your phone. You send the receipt to the clerk. We see the money in our account. We close the deal. It couldn't be simpler than that. And sometimes clients don't understand, the tellers don't understand, they call the clerk, and we have people on hand to explain. So the money transfer is easy. Now you talk about law firms. Okay, some lawyers are still old-fashioned, they send certified checks, and it's terrible. You send certified checks with a courier, and it's the weather's bad, and the money arrives after 6, now you gotta ask for an extension. We beg people, just do the same transfer, your account to my account. And some law firms complain because their bank charges them a $17 wire fee. So instead, we said, that's another reason we opened at every bank, because if we want, where do you trust account, TD? It's TD to TD, there's no fee. So stop complaining. They complained about $17.50, these firms, because they knew that we had a better way to do it. So imagine Friday, last minute, buying and selling, clients on a moving truck. Like, you have no idea how stressful that is. We have one lawyer, all he does is move money around. So that if money's coming into our TD account, remember, you can close up till 6 o'clock. You don't register you can only register at 5, but on the day of closing, if the money goes to the seller lawyer account before 6, the keys can be released. We're closed. The money can be released to the seller, even if you're not registered. That's another reason you get title insurance, because you register Monday morning, even if something showed up on title, you're covered by title. So this way, let's say at 10 to 6, we get the money in TD, and the selling lawyers in Scotia, we can move the money right around between accounts. It's already set to go, buttons are pressed, and the money's in the other lawyer's account before 6, and we can close the deal, because it's a nightmare when you can't. So, it makes the whole month, the agents don't always appreciate the movement of money, but all of this is going on behind the scenes. That's how we pay commission. So the commission goes right into your commission trust account by EFT. You never have to ask me whether to pick up a check. It goes right into your account. And what agents like the most, I think, is like, I already got some emails this afternoon that said, congratulations, the deal is closed. And that went to the client and the agent and to me. How many of you would like to know immediately your deal is registered? It's an automatic, because your email's in the system when the file comes in, so it's an automatic, you get notified. And we have 35 locations, primarily so our buyers can go and pick up keys. Like, we have a location downtown in King and Bay, so if they're a condo downtown, they can go pick up the keys down there. I wish lawyers, other law firms would have our lockbox solution, because it's so much easier. But they don't, so we just do it, and I'm available for support. So this morning, before I went to Treb to lecture, I reviewed 4 status certificates so that buyers could make offers without conditions. And it takes me, on average, 6 minutes to review a status certificate. I can teach you that, that's another seminar. But the point is, I know what to look for, and I don't charge for it at all, because it allows the buyer to make an offer without condition. And just so you know, I don't do this for the buyer. I know the buyer's gonna use me, I do it for the agent. It's a gift for the agent, because the agent sends me business. That's one of the services that we provide. We also review pre-construction contracts, no fee at all, as well, for clients. I don't do those myself. I have other lawyers who work for me that do that, because it takes a little bit longer, and I just don't have the time, but I trust the review because they know how to do it.
You do
So when you
assignments?
ask me about fees, for everything that you just heard, including mobile signing, which people tell me is minimum $300, minimum $300 savings for a client, we charge $1,099 for a purchase, $899 for a sale. Now that is competitive with everybody that's out there. Trust me, it's cheaper
It's cheaper.
than most, but then you have your, you know, your Brampton lawyers who work in the basement and they charge $499. But then when you look at all the pluses, you know, when it comes to, so we're incredibly competitive. And you get me as the lawyer, yeah. So you've got my business cards here. Sometimes they say, just put me on your list. Let the clients call me, let me explain. They always call me. And they ask two questions: how much you charge, where's your office? But then when I start explaining, we come to your house, they don't start bothering me as much anymore. It's like anything else, you've got to add value. So,
Can I just interrupt you quickly, sir?
yes,
$8.99, but then there's always title insurance as well.
of course.
So
It's just his fee,
Just fee.
but
just his
that's-
fee.
You're including that?
No,
That's what I
because
thought.
title insurance depends on the purchase price. Like typically what we'll say is, you're gonna pay HST on my fee.
Yeah,
You're gonna pay the registration fees of $150.
okay.
And the only disbursements are related to the title search itself, pulling the government records and stuff. I usually say with the execution interest, it's an extra $200. But then I say land transfer tax and title insurance is extra because that's based on the purchase price and the mortgage amount, and we have to order the policy like everybody else. So it's just clean as to what it is. And like I said, you know, look, I still smile, you always laugh, you learn something every day, especially with residential tenancies. So we have a lot to cover here, so I will, but if you have questions, please, you can ask. So as you know, there's two different kinds of Airbnb. Have any of you been at an Airbnb yourself? Have any of you hosted people? Airbnb. Okay, so when they did Airbnb, it was all, yes, question?
On your fee, that excludes title searches and all those stuff.
It exclude,
Title searches,
I told you there's $200 for title searches.
that fee plus 200.
Yeah, that's right.
Whether it's 1 or 500 searches, it's 1 or 2 or 3 searches, still it's 200.
You know, on average, it's $200, okay? Now, renting out rooms while you're living there. So that's one common way people do. They invite people into their home, they rent out a room, or they rent out the entire home on Airbnb. So you're seeing both in the market today. Every city is announcing rules. We all know what the Toronto rules were. They had hearings, you know, big hearings. We're waiting for a decision. So in Toronto, the proposed rule is that if you live in the house, you can rent up to 3 bedrooms on Airbnb as many times as you want. You can do it every night of the year, and it's totally fine. But if you want to rent your entire home, under the Toronto rules that were announced, you're limited to 180 days. So this primarily would be for people, let's say, who go to Florida for 6 months out of the year. They want to put their house on Airbnb for 6 months, they would be able to do that. That's what it, I guess, is intended. Yeah,
It would have to be 180 days, consecutive days or 180 days?
total
when it
days.
goes to-
Okay. But here's the problem. It has to be the principal resident. So this right away would have an impact. This is why everybody was complaining about the government hearing, because I would say more than 50% of Airbnb units are investment properties. They're not principal residences at all. So this is why everybody's complaining about this rule. Now, they will also charge 4% tax. So if you're doing any kind of Airbnb in the city, you'll have to register and pay a 4% tax. You'll have to charge 4% to the guest and then pay that to the city.
Because it's
So what does
investment
it mean? This means that most Airbnb units today are not legal. And that's why they're fighting this. And so they're not the principal residents. It's gonna be an issue, so this is gonna be the big issue. And for those people who are afraid, my own view of this is that we're gonna be in court for years over this. Because to me, every existing Airbnb person is gonna say, all this is a zoning change by the city. And up till today, we were legal. So this is, remember those things called non-conforming uses? That says if you were there doing something before the bylaw, you're grandfathered. So all these existing Airbnbs are gonna say we're grandfathered, they're gonna go to court, appeal, Supreme Court, 2-3 years. You know, you understand? Regardless, people are gonna be doing this. Okay,
I have a quick question. On the proposed limitations of the 3 bedrooms or the 180 days, what are the proposed consequences if you go 190 days?
well, there'll be, I assume there'll be penalties, whistleblowers and all these other things. How the people are gonna check, I have no idea.
What about investment?
But what are the repercussions? Like, is there just gonna be fines, you think?
I don't know. I'm sure there'll be fines, but I don't know how it's gonna be policed. I don't know how they're gonna police this.
How about investment properties?
Same thing. Just because you have an investment, how do you know how many days it's been put
So,
out on the
Is that
market?
short-term lease versus long-term?
so if you have an investment property and you Airbnb it out, let's say it's a house, and so is that same 180 days applied?
If it's not, like under the rules, if it's not your principal residence, you're not allowed to be doing this.
Period.
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 That's the problem.
Mhm.
That's why I said there are gonna be lawsuits, because more than half of the Airbnb units are not legal. They're not principal residences.
Right, right.
Okay.
Mark, I have a quick question
Yes.
about that. We were investigating purchasing a property in Austin and realized that they have now stopped giving away any licenses for short-term tenancies. So they put into place licenses for Airbnb.
Where?
In Austin, Texas.
Oh, okay.
So they had sort of a limited number of, they call it short-term, but obviously it's just Airbnb licenses that they gave out, and now it's like you cannot do that.
But this is not putting any limit.
What I guess I'm asking you to presuppose a little bit. Can you see a time when our city will say, if you want Airbnb, you can do whatever you want, but it has to be licensed through the city?
You know, Airbnb is such a tough lobby here. You know, they're financing all the opposition right now. They're gonna finance more. And you see how long it takes. Every decision by council is appealed, and there'll be court hearings. You know, I just think, I can't predict what's gonna be. You know, the hotel industry complained, but they don't seem to be doing much worse. So that says to me that in general, people who would not come to the city because it's too expensive are coming. Not that people who would stay in a hotel want to save a little bit of money. I don't think that's the big thing. I just think that there isn't, the biggest problem is there's not units enough for tenants. You know, there's not, and because the good tenants can't buy because of the stress test, there's a squeeze. There's not enough units coming out to satisfy. That's the real problem. If there was enough units for tenants, nobody would care about this. There's not enough units for tenants. Okay, how many of you use the government lease?
We have to.
So, let's understand the rules of the government lease. A lot of people prepare the Form 400. That's an offer to lease, it's got the brokerage information. You need it because it's got the brokerage information. Then you have the government lease, which is completely pro-tenant. The only pro-landlord provision that is in the government lease that you should always be careful of, it has a check mark where you can put email notices. Really important to check that off, because then you can email showings, you can email anything to the tenant because they've agreed to that kind of notice. Otherwise, you have to hand deliver notice to a terrible tenant. So that's a good provision to always have in the government lease, because the rest of the government lease is completely pro-tenant. Yes?
We've added a Schedule B with a bunch of clauses to protect our landlords. My question, and we're always back and forth on this, is we will do the agreement to lease, we have an accepted offer to lease, and then a lot of even experienced landlords don't have any experience with the standard form. So we put it together for them.
Yeah, and in my landlord guide, I don't know if you have one, there's 6 pages of legal clauses that you can put into the lease.
Okay.
Yeah, I have 6 pages of
And
legal.
can we do that? Or
Yes,
should
like
we
to
do that
me,
for our
when you
clients?
list a property today for sale, Do you put a Schedule B and say, hey, anybody who puts in an offer, I want these clauses?
Yes.
Do you put it out there?
Yeah.
Is there anything wrong with that? No. Okay, a lender selling under power sale, can put that schedule that says,
Oh, yeah.
as is, forget it, you know, drop dead, we're not responsible for anything. Put it in every offer, right?
Yeah.
So lease, you bring in the lease, here's a list of clauses, put them in to the thing. Nothing wrong with that,
I
yes.
think what Irene's asking is, when it comes to the government lease itself, should we be preparing that?
Well, you
or
know,
should the
it's pretty
landlord?
standard, you know, if you want to make it clear, the utilities, et cetera, you can do it and send it, this is the standard way to complete the government lease. But let's say you didn't use it. So if you didn't use it, you just did the Form 400. The tenant at any time can say, I want the government lease. And then if you don't give it to them within 21 days, they can hold back a month's rent as a penalty and the landlord will never see it. It's a penalty. The lease is still in force, but there's more. Even if you send the government lease, they can refuse to sign it and cancel the lease. They just have to give you 60 days notice. So as soon as you send it to them, they can just say, I'm giving you 2 months notice and I'm canceling the lease.
Oh, wow.
A lot of people don't realize that.
Why is that?
Because the law says, use the government lease.
Okay, so that's if you go past the 21 days and you
No,
haven't
no,
given
no.
it.
Even if you give it within 21 days, you've already failed if the tenant wants to cancel. So I'll give you an example. Last summer, 2 tenants signed 2-year leases for houses here in the city, $6,000 to $7,000 a month. They came to see me a couple of weeks ago and said, we signed the lease for 2 years, we have to break it. And the landlord is going crazy. They want listing commissions, they want us to find another tenant, they want approval. And so I just looked at them, I said, when did your lease start? They said, August 2018. I said, do you have the government lease? No. I said, send an email to the landlord, you want the government lease? Wait, whether he sends it to you or not, give 60 days notice, there's nothing he can do, he can cancel.
So he should sign the lease, the landlord should sign the lease before he gives him the keys then.
The 21
Yeah,
day.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So because of that, really, what you should do, I think I say it later in the presentation, is you say to the tenant, give me the Form 400. If you want to, here's the way we fill out the government lease, attach it, and here are the clauses to add to the government lease. Give me a package, you take it to the landlord, you sign it, you're done. You understand? Do it all at once. They don't pay you enough anyways for this. You might as well avoid multiple trips. Trust me, you need the government lease signed, but put in extra clauses. Does
So-
that help?
It does, but in the event that if it wasn't with the 400, is it 21 days from when they accepted an offer, or is it 21 days from the commencement of the lease?
21
they
days
ask,
from the
yeah.
time they ask for the lease.
But
They can ask any time.
But
But
we
if they
know,
don't ask?
no, wait, but we know that it's we knew it's incumbent upon us to do it within.
You gotta get
21
it done before they take possession.
Before possession.
You gotta get it done.
Okay.
A lot of people, like even lawyers were confused about it because the language in the act was not clear. But I finally went to some definitive experts and they said, tenant can cancel, they can refuse to sign the government lease and just cancel.
And not
So
only
get it
that-
done at the time. Now, some landlords may be happy, get out. I'll rent it to somebody else for more money. So you understand, but that landlord that signed a 2-year house lease was not happy
Right.
with their agent. They were not happy with their agent.
There's a couple of brokerages out there that actually want that as part of the documentation and have held back commissions because of it. Just
Yeah,
from the idea I went through.
So if you just take this out of this presentation and do the leases right from the start, right away you're ahead.
So you don't really
Now, if you
have
act for a
like-
tenant, don't sign it. There's no risk in not signing it, and now you've got an out at any time if the tenant wants to break the lease. So if you just are acting for the tenant and you give the Form 400, do it. If the landlord agent is stupid, then just do that, because now the tenant's protected anyways under the government lease. Even if they don't have it, it just gives them all the rights that they have anyways. So if I'm acting for a tenant, I'm never using the government lease. I'm just gonna give them the Form 400. And then if the tenant says to me in 3 months, I wanna break the lease, 2 months notice, gone. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I have one more question? So let's say, so I did a lease about a year ago and I wrote in the agreement lease an hour schedule that the tenant has to sign an Ontario standard lease prior to moving. which he did, and everything's fine. But let's say, before he moves in, he already refuses to sign a lease.
I wouldn't give him the keys.
So you just said,
No, no,
no
you don't
lease,
get
no
the keys.
keys?
You don't get the keys.
Okay.
Look, for a lot of reasons in my guide, they don't put the utilities in their name, they don't show you insurance, no keys. Once you give them the keys,
Right.
okay.
I'll show you
So,
later.
so when do you not need the government lease? So it's important to understand the exceptions. So, example, you share a home with a student. So when you share a home with a student, and the trick is, it's a kitchen or bathroom. If you're sharing a kitchen or bathroom with a student, they're not tenants, meaning they have no rights as a tenant. That's very important. Although, it's a seasonal rental, that means a cottage up north. Somebody said to me, can I say my condominium downtown Toronto is a vacation home? And I said, no, you can't say it's a vacation home, but agents try anything to say. So, what does this mean? It means that if your student is bothering you, well, or not paying, what happens in a hotel if you don't pay for your room rate on time? What happens to your key? It stops working. Well, that's it. You change the locks. You understand, if somebody's not a tenant, so I had a landlord call me up in London, and their kid let in a friend, into the house. And the mother and it was supposed to be a favor, the mother texted the kid's mother, the tenant's mother texted the kid's mother, here's $500 rent. And the kid's mother said, you don't really have to pay anything, but they took it. And then they said they're tenants. So I said, where are they staying? And he said, they're in the basement. So I said, okay, is the basement a complete unit with a bathroom and a kitchen? They said, no, the kitchen they share upstairs. I said, they're not a tenant. Just lock them out and tell them that if they come in, they're trespassing. And that's it, because they're not a tenant. Very important to understand. Okay, so again, this just, I gave you this, but some of the clauses you can add, for example, are the no smoking, no cannabis, no growing cannabis. That should be in every lease. Whether it's in your own Schedule B or mine, it should be in it. This is my condominium rental clause that says this tenant will follow all the rules of the condominium, which would include, in most condominiums, no Airbnb, no cannabis as well. I have a first and last month's rent clause because the government lease says you can only take last month's rent. So my clause says a deposit equal to 2 months' rent is due at the time of acceptance of the lease by the landlord. That's legal. But the language is in there, this allows you to take the whole 2 months up front. Now, what I warn people about is to be careful about 1 year's rent in advance. Because there was a case where a judge said if the tenant offers the year's rent, it's legal. If the landlord asks for a year's rent, it's not legal. The problem is there was another case where the tenant offered a year's rent in the lease, and then went to the board and said, the only reason I offered it was because the listing agent said if I didn't, I wouldn't get the place. And the judge said, I believe you, give the money back. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And then they also charged the landlord with a penalty for taking the rent in advance. So, when I say be careful, if it's a bidding war, and one of the bidders offers a year's rent, you have legitimate proof, you've got all the offers, then to me, you could accept that. Because it's a legitimate offer to try to beat others in a bidding war. Otherwise, if it's not a bidding war, I'll say, if it's a foreign student or a new immigrant, I would take the shot because, in my experience, they're not really looking to cause trouble. They don't have a credit rating, they want to build a credit. Foreign students, the parents just want them to study. They don't want them going to the board to start trouble. But if it's not that, be very careful of who you're renting to. Okay, when acting for the landlord, so this is what I just said earlier. Attach the government lease, attach the clauses to protect the landlord. So that's how you should do it from now on. Put your clauses in as well. Okay, can the landlord change their mind? So I get this a lot. So the landlord has signed a lease today. They got the first and last month rent. They cashed the checks. It's supposed to start October the 1st, and now they find out the tenant is a professional tenant. and you know the definition of a professional tenant, they have been. So now the landlord calls me and says, can I cancel the lease? And I say, of course you can cancel the lease. They say, great! I said, but there are consequences. There are consequences. What are the consequences? Well, you have to give back the first and last month's rent. Oh, I'll do that. No, but now you could be sued for damages. So what damages could the tenant sue the landlord if they signed the lease for October the 1st and they change their mind now? Today, here's your money back. I changed my mind. What damages? You know, we live in a good, fair country. What could the tenant claim?
You can't find another place to live, his moving expenses are already.
So his storage expenses,
Temporary accommodations.
temporary accommodation, and let's say he's got to pay $500 or more a month to live someplace else. That's all lawsuits, okay? So I said you could cancel. I didn't say it's free, but the question was, can you cancel? Yes. Now, the tenant, though, has to reduce losses, so the tenant can't just sit around, you know, at the Royal York. They have to try to reduce their damages. And so, my question to the landlord is, here's your options. I'll try to speak plainly. Pick your poison. You have to choose one. Both are no good. So what are your two choices? Get sued by the tenant, or not sleep every night because you have a professional tenant living. Do you understand? And so if you're sued, okay, yeah, it's not pleasant, but you hire a paralegal and you say, delay, delay, delay. What does the tenant do? Delay, delay, delay. So you fight a lawsuit or live with a professional tenant. I gotta tell you, when I put it that way, 90% of landlords say what? Cancel the lease. I'll take my chances, I don't give a shit. I'm gonna do that. And so, but you see, that's the kind of advice you have to give somebody. I'm not gonna say, oh, you can't cancel, because, you know, they have to understand their rights one way or another. Okay. Can you evict a tenant to turn the unit into an Airbnb? There's the question. Can you evict a tenant? If you could, there would be no tenants left in the city. So there's a short answer to your question. There would be no more tenants. I read in the paper yesterday, somebody said I could get $1,600 today for my basement apartment a month. On Airbnb, I get $7,000 a month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you kidding?
They didn't say where it was, but, so why would you have any tenant if you could do that? So,
Oh, yeah.
is there a way to do it? So there's one notice under the Act. It's the N13. So under the N13, there's 3 ways you can terminate a tenancy legally. One is to demolish the place. You're demolishing the building. 4 months notice. Second, you are substantially renovating and you need a building permit. 4 months. You're changing the use to commercial. So you see, that's what people are saying. Airbnb is a business. I'm changing the use to commercial. I should be able to use this reasonably. And so, unfortunately, the business can't be a residential use. This is still a residential use. If you were converting to a retail store or an office space, that's one thing. But this is still a residential, so it doesn't work. And also, because of renovation, you've heard about this. I'll remind people who didn't. So that substantial renovation reason. You had 8 tenants in Kensington Market, each paying $1,000 a month rent. The landlord served them this notice 4 years ago, 3 years ago, because the building was a mess. Each of them, under the law, said, we want the right to rent these units back at the same rent when it's finished. And they had the right. And they all said, we want the right. And they told the landlord, moved out, watched. The building was finished in 2.5 years. The 8 tenants came back, or 5 or 6 of them. We want to go in. We're here. The landlord said, I'm very sorry, but I've rented each unit out for $4,000 a month to new tenants. Goodbye. So they went to the board to complain. Hey, where's the law? And the judge said, I feel very sorry for you, but I have no authority to kick tenants out who are paying rent. They don't have the authority to kick a tenant out who's paying rent. Those tenants did nothing wrong. So they said, if you want to sue for damages, you know, what damages do you have, right? Renting in another place. Now look at it from the landlord standpoint. 8 units, $8,000, 100,000 a year, what's that building worth? At 100,000 a year rent, what's that building worth? My commercial mavens here, what's that building worth? 900,000?
Oh,
Maybe a million,
5 million.
3 million, 2 million, cap rates, 2 million,
That's
okay.
a good cap rate
Same building,
with those guys in it.
250,000 a year, what's that building worth now?
Yeah.
6 million, 7 million? They're gonna fine the landlord maybe $100,000. How many landlords would pay that $100,000 in their
Easy.
sleep? Do you understand? And so they don't care. And so, but because of that case and all the hysteria, the government says they're reviewing the act for a whole bunch of things, but it's not gonna be easy to get this renovation reason anymore.
The only reason that one was made the news because one of them was an actress. One of them was an actress on CBC, that's why.
Okay.
That made the news.
Okay, but the point is, it doesn't work. So now we have, can you use the personal use reason? So let's talk about the personal use eviction reason. Most of you are familiar with this reason. If the lease has come to an end and the landlord wants to take it back for their family use, it's legal. You have to give 60 days notice, pay 1 month rent as a penalty, and stay for 1 year. And as long as they stay for 1 year, they can rent it for double the rent, they can sell it, they can do whatever the hell they want. But they gotta stay for a year. So that's the personal use reason. And it was abused. There was supposed to be a case yesterday. I don't know if you saw the Star this morning. But what happened was a couple of owners, it was owned by a company, they transferred 1% title to their son. So the son with 1% title served the notice saying, get out, I'm moving in. Because a company can't serve the family reason. It's not allowed. So they transferred 1%, and so the tenant tried to say it's an abuse of the system, and we were waiting for a decision, but then the landlord just had said, in the paper this morning, they just canceled and started again. So I don't know what they're doing, but I think they're looking for some kind of a settlement to deal with this. But that's the only legal way. But you should know that most tenants now are fighting this because they don't believe them. They think it's just a ruse. The landlord may stay a couple months, then sell it, because when you sell it without a tenant, you can get a lot more money. You can stage the house, open house.
Yep.
You understand? So tenants are very suspicious about this reason, and they do not leave willingly. They don't leave willingly.
What's the penalty if somebody doesn't stay the year?
Maximum 25,000 penalty. So it's not a big, huge penalty. A lot of people would pay it, but that's the penalty. They're thinking of raising the penalty.
So who gets the money? The government.
But the question is, could you give the notice if you are planning to use it yourself with Airbnb? So this is a hard question, because to me, if you were renting the whole house on Airbnb, that would be considered bad thing, right? Because you're not really living there. But let's say you moved in and you just put a room on Airbnb, then I could make a good argument that that would not be a violation because you are living there.
It's still your primary residence.
It's your primary residence, you're living there, and the fact is, if you're renting a room, that's not even a tenant, because they're just sharing the room with you. So I think you could use that reason as long as you move in and maybe rent to a guest. But if you put the whole unit on Airbnb, that would be a violation, bad faith. Okay. We don't have any cases yet, but that's how I could see that going. So, next question. Can you evict a tenant who's renting on Airbnb? A lot of tenants do this. So they rent a place for $2,000 a month. They put it out on Airbnb for 10 days. They collect $2,000. They sleep at a friend's, and then they live there free. This is how they do it. And landlords call me complaining. When I was on AM Canada with Mulroney, they asked me that question. And I said, I'll tell you what the legal answer is, but from a practical standpoint, how many of you have ever stayed at an Airbnb? Yourself. Okay. Now, when you apply to be a guest, could the host check you out as a guest?
Yeah.
Sure.
So the host has to see, are you a 4-star guest, are you a 5-star guest? The whole world now is 5-star, 4-star. Everybody has like 5-star. Leave me alone, I don't want to rate anybody, but you have to rate everybody.
Black
But the point is, don't get the place unless you're checked out. And now, when you're looking at a host, what are you looking for? Are they rated 4 or 5 stars? Because if they don't make a good experience for you, why would you go there? So when I was talking on the show, I said, when I find out my tenant's doing it, why am I really bothered? It means that my place is being kept 5-star and I've got 5-star people there. Do you understand, just from a practical standpoint, it's helping him pay the rent, do I really care? But some people care. And so the law says it's an illegal sublet. It's a sublet if they're renting the whole place. If they were renting a room, you could argue it's not, because it's a guest. But if they're renting the whole place, you could say it's an illegal sublet, and you could evict, but you have to start within 60 days of learning about it. Also, you're not allowed under the Act to rent the place for more than you're paying. And if somebody's renting for a couple $100 a day, that is much more than you're paying in your monthly rent. So for 2 reasons, you can evict, but you gotta be able to prove it. So yes, you can evict for this, but you really want to. Okay, that's a choice you have to make. Condos, many of you deal with condos. And so most condominiums want to get rid of Airbnb for security reasons. Some don't care. On George Street, they allow, all the condominiums on George Street allow Airbnb. I called the manager and I said, do you have problems? He said, no, everybody checks in with the concierge. We know who's there, there's a fee that you pay. We never had a complaint.
Are these the new buildings or the old buildings further south?
The newer buildings on George Street, yeah, 105, I think 150. You know, those buildings, they allow Airbnb. But you check, most don't. But if a building wants to stop it, they could change the declaration, but that takes 80% of the owners. I've never seen 80% of owners agree on anything. Or they can just pass a rule. And the directors have the power to pass a rule any day. So most of them pass the same rule about cannabis, no growing, no smoking cannabis anywhere. Just pass the rule. And same way, no Airbnb. And to overturn a rule, the owners can call a meeting, but I've never seen the owners do it. Because most of them agree with this. They don't want Airbnb. So if I'm looking at a status certificate, you know, I have to be able to tell this to people. So when we're important. This is important to a lot of people. Pets are important. Some buildings don't allow pets. Some people have a 25-pound restriction. Some people 1 pet instead of 2 pets. This is important. So I check this right away in the rules. Also, just as a tip for you, there are 2,800 condominium buildings in the city of Toronto. So as soon as somebody tells me the condominium number, I know how old the building is. If it's 2,700, it was built a year and a half ago. If it's 2,000, it was built 10 years ago. If it's 1,000, it was built 25 years ago. If it's 400, it was built 40 years ago. So that tells me right away, just by the condominium number, how old the building is. So as an example, I got one today, condominium number 1,772. So as soon as I saw that, I put a question mark. Why? Because everything between 1,200 and 1,900 was built between 1995 and 2007. What's that?
Kitech.
Kitech. As soon as I see that number, Kitech possibility, and I found it. No, but I knew it before I even saw it. As soon as the agent called, they said, what's the number? 17. I said, is there Kitech in the building? How did you know? Okay, but it's important. I also asked the agent, how many units have sold in the building in the last 3 months? 3. 3 people sold. Closed? Yes. That means 3 lawyers, 3 lenders, CMHC have already looked at the building. They passed it. I already know 90% I'm passing the building. These are the questions you need to answer. You understand? That's why when I say it takes me 6 minutes, it doesn't take me that long, because I already know the answers to these questions. And so if the tenant is subletting or you're illegally subletting, you get a letter from the condominium people saying you're violating the rule and that it costs minimum $750 plus HST because the lawyer had to write a letter. I wish I worked for condominium corporations and I could charge $1,000 a letter because it's the clerk who does the letter and you got to pay it. Let's say you don't pay. If you don't pay, you put a lien on your unit, that's another $1,000. And so this is how corporations try to enforce Airbnb rules, pet rules, everything else. Okay. Rent increases for this year. Are you finding this helpful, by the way?
Yes.
So The most you could raise the rent this year, 1.8%. They announced next year, 2.2%. So what's the exception? If the tenant leaves on their own. So if the tenant leaves on their own, you can raise the rent as much as you want. Now, they passed a new rule last November that said brand new units after November 15th, outside rent control. So what does that mean?
They're not social.
Let's say somebody takes occupancy of a condominium this year, brand new. You rent it out. A lot of builders allow you to rent it out at occupancy. Next year, no limit on rent increases, 10, 20, 40%, because it's a brand new unit. After November 15th, there's another exception. Let's say you have a young couple, and they buy a bungalow this year on the Danforth. And they, for the very first time, create a brand new basement apartment. Never before rented, never before used as a basement apartment. They get permits, they put it in. That basement apartment will be outside rent control. The house can't be, it's an older house. But the new unit, as long as the couple is living in the house, will also be outside rent. So the question is, you can get in trouble here. If you ask for a tenant this year, and they come to you in a year and say, my landlord just raised the rent by 20%, and the lawyer says it's legal, why didn't you protect me? So I've given you, this also comes from my landlord guy. The landlord and tenant agree, the maximum rent increase under this lease will be 3% a year. Why? Because it's a new lease, new building, and the landlord has no limit. So to me, this clause is if you're acting for a tenant. Now, the landlord agent may not be so stupid. He may look at this and say, no, I'm not going to agree to this because my landlord can raise the rent as much as he wants. But now at least you can say to the tenant, you approve, I tried to protect you. You have to understand this, that your rent is not protected by rent control. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're saying that's not really legit, you're just trying?
When you say legit, it's my attempt to try to limit the amount of an increase the landlord can do
If you're working
for
for
a
the-
brand new unit.
If you're working for the tenant, yeah, you
Right.
have it.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, okay.
But you're saying it's not enforceable, really?
Sure it is.
Or
It is,
is it-
but if the landlord
if you
doesn't
have the
sign-
clause in,
It's-
then the landlord would not be able to raise the rent
It's in
more
the
than
contract.
3%. But if it's not in, the landlord can do whatever he wants.
Or if he doesn't want to sign it.
So now,
let it.
yeah, so now we
Is
come
that date
to
November 15th this year?
last year.
2018.
Last year.
Last year.
It's the old 1991 rule.
Yeah, that's what they try. So I also tell people that if the NDP becomes the government next, it'll be gone. All of this will be gone. Okay, so now this comes to the meat, okay? A lot of landlords think, the lease is up, I want to sell the building, can I give the tenant 60 days notice, I'm selling the building? And when I tell them no, they go crazy. What do you mean no? No, you cannot evict. If you're taking the place back for your kids and stay for a year, then you could sell. I don't want to do that. Well, then the only answer is if you find a buyer who's going to be moving in on closing. That's the only way to evict. But then they say, yeah, but now I can't stage the house. I got to give 24 hours notice. The house looks like crap. You know, I'm not going to sell it for as much money. What the hell is that? Well, what should I do? And so here's my answer. Find the tenant another place to live and write a check. That's it. How much is the check? It goes up every day. And the reason it goes up is the tenant has nowhere to go. This is the biggest problem in the city today. And that's why tenants fight this, because, yeah, they know it's legal, but they have nowhere to go. Somebody said, I have nowhere to go. I'm paying $6,000 a month. I can't even find a place for $6,000 a month. They have nowhere to go. And so I say, my formula used to be the difference in rent for 1 year and moving costs. Pay $400 a month more, I'll give you $5,000 plus moving costs. That's a starting point with most tenants. But you understand, they don't have to agree. And I say to landlords, I don't want to pay $10,000. I said, you're going to lose more on the sale of your house than $10,000. I know from experience. They go, oh, no. Okay, go ahead. All right. So, the best thing, by the way, pay them to get out.
Pay what?
then you list.
Pay the
Pay them to
Yeah.
get a,
Oh, yeah.
They sign, you guys write a check, whatever it is, it's the best solution.
just
I've
not
done this
right.
too long. Okay. It's not easy though. I'm not gonna pretend that it's easy. So now let's say you're selling a condo downtown and there's a tenant in there. They're a monthly tenant, but they refuse to leave. If they have a lease for another 8 months, you can't kick them out before the end of 8 months anyways. But let's say they're on a monthly tenancy. They're not leaving. They won't make a deal. So you have 3 potential buyers for this condo. The first buyer is an investor who says, I'm happy with the rent the tenant is paying, I'll keep the tenant. That's buyer number 1. Buyer number 2 says, no, the rent is too low. I want vacant possession, so I can fix the place out and double the rent. So right away, that's a problem, because there's no legal way to kick out the tenant, but that's a potential buyer. And the third potential buyer is the one with a daughter who's going to Ryerson downtown, and they need a place to stay, so they're moving in. Legitimate buyer moving in. Those are your 3 buyers for the condo. Okay, so the first one comes in that says they'll accept the tenant. That's your dream buyer. You just write out the offer, accept the tenant, transfer the rent, done. But let's say buyer number 2 comes in, and you say to the agent, we can't kick out the tenant. And so the buyer says, I'm going to give you, no bidding war, $30,000 over asking, I want vacant possession. Now you see, it's a good offer. So what you do is you make the deal conditional on making a deal with the tenant. So you say, okay, we'll accept this. Give me 7 days to go make a deal with the tenant. We'll offer the tenant 10 grand. We'll offer the tenant 15 grand. If he takes it, we have a deal. So you can still do the deal, but you see why? You must make it conditional on the tenant. You make a deal with the tenant, now the buyer comes in, vacant possession, they can do whatever the hell they want. Now we come to the third reason, which is the daughter. So the good news here is no compensation has to be paid to the tenant if you have a legitimate good faith buyer who's coming into the unit. You can give 60 days notice and the buyer's moving in. Now, is it possible that the buyer's daughter is not moving in? And this is a lie, just to get vacant possession so that the buyer can fix it up and double the rent on somebody else. Is it possible?
It's possible.
And if it happens, the tenant is going after the seller because the seller is the one that's delivering this notice. So as a result, I've given you the clause to use. It also comes out of my land. I put it in the material. So let's go through the clause. What I tried to do is, this is based on my experience with all this crap. So again, my advice was always what? Get rid of the tenants in advance, but let's say you can't. So this clause says the buyer tells you, I'm moving in on closing, or my immediate family moves in, and then it says the seller will give the tenant the 60 days notice under the act. So if the deal was firm today, monthly tenancy, notice November 30th, we close in December. That's how you set up the offer. That's what it says. But then it says, the buyer agrees to provide whatever support may be required. You know, it could be an affidavit. It might even be attending a hearing that says, we're moving in. But it also says, we'll indemnify the seller for any damages if we don't stay 1 year after closing. In other words, if we're bad faith and you get sued by the tenant, we're going to pay all those damages. Then I go on to say, well, what happens if the tenant disputes and doesn't leave? I say, well, we'll extend the deal, in my clause, 30 days. You might want to put a longer extension, but if you do put a longer extension, you have to make sure the buyer mortgage commitment doesn't expire. So you always have to be careful with extensions. You know, does the buyer have a mortgage? And finally, if the tenant still hasn't left, now what do? In my clause it says the buyer can either cancel the deal or accept the tenant. You could put the parties have to mutually agree to extend or cancel, but the point is most buyers will not close. They can't close if the tenant is not left. Yes.
We had this exact same situation. Our client was buying a tenanted condo for her mother. Tenant was lovely until the unit was sold. Then she said, I don't believe you. We did affidavits. My buyer went to court. We had so many extensions that our buyer said, I can't do anymore. I'm going to lose my rate.
We
And,
had a similar case. So I had a similar
Uh,
case. Now, let's say I'm the lawyer for the seller and I'm acting for your seller, you're the agent, and we do, to put this clause in, November 30th, December 10th. I just did one of these yesterday for people. In a week, I'm gonna say to you, go speak to the tenant. Okay, you can go to the tenant and say, look, you met the buyers, you met the daughter, you know, she's going wires. We have to sell at the end of November. Have you found another place? What are your plans? 30 to 40% of the time, the tenant will say, yeah, I met everybody, I know it's good, maybe they'll make a deal, give me an extra month, 2 weeks, and I'll sign and I'll get out. Or I've got a place to go to temporarily. So then I'll say to the agent, tell me. And if it looks like they have made arrangements, I'll say, okay, maybe we'll just wait till close. But most of the time now, they're saying, I don't believe this. This is a trick. And so I'm not gonna wait until November 30th. Immediately, I'll call my paralegal and say, I need a hearing in November. Takes usually 6 weeks to get a hearing. So who's coming to the hearing? The daughter with the acceptance to Ryerson, the seller with the contract saying I have to sell, the tenant, they're lying. Now, 80% of the time, it's good faith. The judge says, I accept this. The tenant has to go, and the judge writes, the tenancy will terminate November 30th. So even if you go to court November 10th, you get a hearing, you can't terminate before November 30th. But at least now you have a court order. In my experience with a court order, 80 to 90% of tenants will leave by the end of November. For the 15 to 20% that don't, it takes 30 days to go to the sheriff. In a perfect world, and then they're out in 30 days by the sheriff. But I had a couple myself where professional tenants were there. They wouldn't leave. And forget about paralegals. There was a major law firm acting on the other side for the landlord. At landlord and tenant board, against this tenant. It took 1 year to get the tenant out. And they would write me every 2 months, we need another extension. Because of who give a shit what they were saying. I just knew so I went to finally the buyer said to me, we lost our mortgage. So we don't know if we can buy. I said, do you still want the place? Oh God, yes. Do you have a place to stay? Yes. Okay, went back to the lawyer. You see, if we canceled the deal, they couldn't kick them out because their reason was gone. They were not selling to us anymore. So I said, we'll extend, but you gotta sign something that from the minute you get rid of the tenant out, we have a month to get a mortgage. A month to finalize a mortgage. You understand? Like, I'm not closing in 2 days because we don't have a mortgage and I don't even know when to apply for mortgage. They totally agreed. Took a year, client got a mortgage, got a chance to inspect the place to make sure the tenant wasn't a disaster, but we closed. Now, I think, Irene, you said you had a similar situation, professional tenant. So you see, imagine a private seller, a year, and these tenants usually are not paying rent because they're all kinds of nonsense in there. They're not paying rent, they're appealing orders, he's paying a mortgage every month, and he's got to wait a year. And so when I said, just write a check for $10,000 before you start, no, it's going to cost me too much, they lost more than $50,000 because of this all. You understand? So, but you see, buyers have to be warned that even with this notice, there's no guarantee the tenant is going. If there was, they wouldn't even be there. They would have already been paid to leave. So you have to understand that it's not easy. I want you to get paid. I want the deal to close, but you really have to have that conversation with the listing agent as well. Like, what the hell have you been discussing with the tenant? Because, as you said, they can be very nice until they realize they don't have a place to go, and then they go get advice and they just refuse and they put delays, adjournments, I'm sick, I'm in the hospital, adjournment, they know all. So does that help?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I have one question about that. I'm living in my investment condo that I got my tenants out a few months ago, so it was tricky,
What reason did you use?
because I moved in.
You gonna stay a year?
Are you gonna stay a year?
Oh, yeah, I am. I love
for
it
you.
there, actually, I might
Good for
stay
you.
10, but anyhow,
But do
I
you
don't
have
know.
another property? Do you have a house?
no,
Okay,
I sold the house.
so you're okay.
Yeah. And I didn't know when I had to pay them that free month.
You have to pay them any time before eviction. Anytime before you went to court to get an order, you have to pay them.
So
You didn't have to pay them right away.
okay, so I kind of said, here's your half of it, and then I said, you know, I'm gonna come a week before, I'll give you the other half, just to make sure they were really leaving.
Right.
Yeah,
Every situation depends on the landlord's relationship with the tenant. Okay, sometimes I'd say, it's a lot of money, bad person, hire a lawyer, I'm writing the check to the lawyer. When you're out, you pick up the check from the lawyer. Because I don't trust them.
right.
You pay them and, oh yeah, you know, by circumstances.
But it was
okay.
tricky, every day I was like, I
Oh, no,
don't
it's
really
not
know if
easy.
they're-
This
we
is
didn't
not
look
easy.
yet. We didn't
So
look
you have
yet.
to try to manage every situation. So, be very careful now about everything. Scammers all over the place. So, I do a lot of help for realtors who get RICO calls. And RICO's much harder now than ever before. The penalties are much more severe. You let a buyer into a showing without you being there,
Oh, yeah.
$10,000 now, minimum.
That's a minimum, they should,
Minimum 10,000. It used to be a course. 5 years ago, you could take a
the
course.
$5,000.
I was late, you know, the kids were, you know,
trespassing.
whatever, traffic, weather, whatever, we let them in. You have to assume the seller has cameras in the house watching everything. And they do. So that's a no-no with RICO. Now, tenants. Got a lot of scammers out there who make a living sending in applications for units. You understand?
An application
Send in
for what?
applications for rent.
Okay.
Send them in. And then, of course, the landlord will call them. And then they start out with this ridiculous foreign accent to make them look stupid. Like they're stupid. And they're answering questions, you know. They want the landlord to basically say, I can't rent to you. And they take the call, and then a letter goes out, we're going to human rights because you discriminated against me and I have the call reported. If you pay me $3,000, I will not complain to human rights about you when it becomes public. That's why they write that the whole human rights tribunal is a scam. It should not even be there. That ridiculous case in BC where the transgender guy brought that human rights case against these poor little, what do you call them? Waxing ladies, because they wouldn't wax his genitals. And he was a transgender, and they refused. They went to human rights, and these people had to go out of business because they couldn't afford the fees. That's human rights crap, how it's used. So you have to be so careful when you do this. I tell people, be very careful with tenants. You know, I know you like to do favors for landlords, and anyways, let's say, I get this all the time, it also comes from my landlord, but how do you turn down a tenant? It's simple. We preferred another tenant. That's it, that's all you say. Anything else, you could be discriminating. Or, we're still reviewing applications.
That's the best one.
If you haven't made a final decision. Here, you're not, if you say that every time, they can't catch you. Now, if it's a credit issue, they don't have credit, you have to tell them. You didn't pass our credit test. That's easy. But if it's not credit, and you just don't want them for any reason, remember what I just said.
But you can always say it's credit, because,
Well, no, you're supposed to say if it's a credit issue.
no, but what
I
I'm
thought you
saying,
couldn't.
can you not say, if, you know, we don't
What
like
if
your
they've got
credit score?
amazing credit?
Oh, yeah, you can, if it's the truth.
Well, yeah, but-
No.
like
If
who's
you
the-
say
who's
you
in charge of
haven't
the
passed our
benchmark?
credit check, if you haven't passed our credit check, that's fine. But
Yeah.
I'm saying there's a lot of times when they pass credit. But
Yeah,
we
but
don't
who-
want them.
But what does pass mean? Like if I say I'm not gonna take anybody under 870,
Well,
You just
That's
leaving
my
yourself
benchmark,
open.
like,
That's what they say,
all I
right,
can tell you
AAA
is-
tenant.
you can always make a claim to human rights. This is a good answer.
Right.
This is a good answer. We prefer to have a tenant. Not discriminating against anybody. Language matters, okay? The pet issue is just a difficult issue. I get it on both sides. Landlord says tenant swore they didn't have a pet. Swore. Lease says no pets. First day, they brought in 2 dogs to my house. I want to evict them. I said, there's nothing you can do. Unless the dogs are damaging your house, there's nothing you can do.
Then how are you gonna know?
Well, anyway, then I have the agents call me, I have the best tenant, best credit, they have a small dog. as soon as I tell landlords they have a small dog, they refuse, even though they have excellent credit. So you see, on the tenant side, they're forced to lie, or they can't even get in. Landlord side, how do you check? So there's no good answer here. No good answer. All I say in my landlord guide for landlords, if this really bothers you, get your 10-year-old to help you qualify the tenant. And they look at me, 10-year-old, yeah. Just say, go to Instagram, go to Facebook. If they got a dog, there'll be a picture of them somewhere. Look at me with my dog. You know, and so, and you laugh, good property managers check people out. So they do. That's how they find this stuff out. I wrote this in an investment magazine a few years ago. And I got a call from this woman in Hamilton, maybe 2 weeks later. I read your article. Oh, okay. I rented my house. Okay. I checked Facebook. Okay. There was a picture of this woman with this humongous pig on a leash. She said, "Is there a pig in my house?" And she wasn't talking about the woman's husband. So I said, "I don't know, but you have the right 24 hours notice, you know, just go in, check the smoke filters." I don't think she waited 24 minutes. She just ran to the house. She calls me back the next day. "Mark, I went into one of the bedrooms. In one of the beds, sleeping was this humongous pig." And I'm laughing on the phone, but I can't say anything. But she asked me a good question. Can I evict? Because there's a pig in the house. So I said to her, well, I really don't know what the bylaw says in Hamilton. Go to the city hall and see the building bylaw. P.S. The bylaw in Hamilton allows licensed pigs to be passed. This pig was licensed. There was nothing she could do.
There's a license for it.
Unless she could prove the pig was damaging the house, which she couldn't. There was nothing she could do. So I said, well, thank you for sharing this story. And she said, why are you thanking me? I said, the next time somebody calls me up and says there's a dog, I said, be happy there's not 2 pigs in the house. So I have nothing to say. You know, it's like I always learned, I had a person, whenever a buyer calls you at 7 o'clock at night on the day of closing, they're not calling to say thank you, Mark. There's always something. And I don't even like to pick up the phone, but I pick up the phone. There's always a story. A month or 2 ago, I pick up the phone. Hello, we're at the house, congratulations. There's a strange man living in the basement. He wasn't here when we did the home inspection or the visit. He says he has a verbal lease with the owner, and he's not going. What should we do? I said, call the police. What the hell, he's trespassing. What do you want me to say? I think they called the cops, and within 24 hours, the listing agent, somehow they got rid of him. He was gone in 24 hours. But when I tell you, nothing surprises. Nothing surprises. So, I think that brings us to the end. Did you find that helpful?
Thank you.
So, you have my business card. If you ever have a question, email, trust me, I have, I'm sure I'm looking at my machine, 100 to answer from the time I've been in here. Send me an email. You have them here. I'm leaving this pretty stand in case anybody wants my card. You can give my name out. Put me on your list of lawyers. I'm happy to quote. If your client has mobility issues, we go to the retirement home. We sign people everywhere. They are, believe me, this matters to a lot of people. And if anybody wants to pick up a landlord guide, they're just $20, which is really just my cost.
I bought one. I can ask a question, but
$20, you can get a landlord guide. So are there any questions?
Yes.
Before we break up? Yes.
Smoking.
Smoking.
So, the rules and regs are being changed in a lot of buildings, and then it becomes clear it has to be whatever the rules and regulations are. But if the rules and regulations of the condo allow smoking, then is there any way the lease can say no smokers? Or is that again against the act?
You can put no smoking in a lease, but the only way you can ever evict somebody for smoking is if the smoking would be against the rules,
Right.
or you're bothering people. So you see with the cannabis trial, there's already been cases where they've tried to evict tenants for smoking cannabis. And the tenants have said, we're vaping cannabis. And vaping does not give the strong odor as smoking a cigarette, and there was one case where a judge said, I believe the tenants are vaping, and they're not bothering people. There's also, they sell these grow tents where you can grow cannabis safely without generating any moisture. So unless you can prove the tenant is growing in such a way that it's damaging the place, you can't keep living. So that's evolving, but you know, the good news is that there is ways. So regardless what a building says about smoking, a condo or anything, you can't evict unless it's bothering somebody else. So there wasn't-
Even if it's against the rules?
well, the
The
condo,
condo kid.
most condo buildings stopped, you know, what they say now is that we don't allow cannabis, and we don't allow cigarettes, but if you were smoking before the rule, then you can still smoke cigarettes in
So
your
there's a
unit.
grandfather
In your
thing
unit.
going
They-
on.
What most buildings have done is they grandfather cigarette smoking, but not cannabis,
But only for existing tenants, not for new tenants?
not for new tenants, that's right.
But isn't there the medical marijuana, if you have a note or something from a doctor and you use some marijuana
Yeah,
medically?
so
they-
in my guide, I actually have, what I put in was the medical cannabis exception. So in my clauses, it says that if you must smoke cannabis, even though we don't allow it, you need to give me a letter from a doctor that proves you need medical cannabis, and you have to smoke in such a way that doesn't bother anybody or damage the place. And that's what condominiums have as well for human rights.
Yeah.
That if you have a doctor's note, you can smoke or grow, but you have to prove to us you're not bothering anybody, meaning vaping, or growing and damaging the place. So that's how condominiums are handling this medical marijuana business. Okay, you want to pick one up?
Yeah.
Oh, you're.
You too.